Well, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us for this, the third in our series of 2021 webinars. Today we are pleased to be talking about Fog Seals and Rejuvenators, really very top of the curve pavement preservation treatments that we can use to keep our good roads in good condition. We've got a jam-packed schedule for you today, and let me quickly give everyone an overview of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to start off by covering the basics of Fog Seals and Rejuvenators, really what they are, where we use them, what kind of roads we use them on, and then most importantly, I think, why we use them. Then we're going to have with us a couple of guest speakers who are both experts in the asphalt industry, longtime veterans, one from each of our two major suppliers of these Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. First, we'll have Scott Metcalf from the Ergon Asphalt and Emulsion Company joined to talk about their rejuvenating fog seal they call eFog. And then following Scott, we'll have Wade Miller with us representing Collaborative Aggregates. They produce a plant-based or bio-based rejuvenator product that we've been using called Delta Mist. After those gentlemen have presented their respective products, then we'll have our QC manager, Matt Tito, join in to talk about how we do these jobs and most importantly, the keys to getting successful outcomes with Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. Then my colleague, Art Baker, will spend some time with one of our clients, award-winning pavement management clients, the town of Lexington, who have been using these Fog Seals and Rejuvenators for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, so that they can share their experience in using them with us. Then I'll wrap up by touching on what I think are the primary benefits of using Fog Seals and Rejuvenators, and then we'll answer as many of your questions as we can. So let's jump in. No big surprise here, right? We all know that the roads in this country are really not up to any of our standards. You know, and as a transportation professional, it's kind of embarrassing to me that we've allowed ourselves to get to this poor state of asphalt pavement condition that we're in. So when you stop and think about how did we get here? Why are our roads in such terrible shape? You know, in my opinion, I think the number one reason why our roads are in such awful shape is that we didn't do a great job doing pavement preservation or good old-fashioned preventive maintenance to our roads. We've been a great country of road builders. We're really good at building stuff, but maybe sometimes not so good at doing preventive maintenance. And by preventive maintenance, I'm talking about keeping good roads good, utilizing these type treatments up at the top of the curve. So when we talk about Fog Seals and Rejuvenators, that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about tools to keep good roads in good condition so that we don't have to spend lots and lots of money rebuilding or rehabilitating roads with treatments down at the bottom of the curve. So as we go through our presentation here today, we're going to see lots of differences in some of the products that are available in this Fog Seal Rejuvenator category. But the one thing that they have in common is that they are topically applied liquid preservation treatments, typically applied at a rate of about 1/10 of a gallon per square yard, plus or minus, depending on a bunch of factors there. And I want to distinguish them, if I could, between other uses of Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. In fact, I had an email earlier this morning from one of our clients expressing some confusion regarding fog seals that we use on our cold in place recycling. So fog seals are used for other things. For example, we use them on our CIR or cold in place recycling during the interim period from the time the recycling is completed until the wearing course is applied. And we do that to keep the water out of the recycled mix and to keep the fines from raveling. We also see fog seals used on chip seals as a way to lock in the aggregate and darken the surface appearance. And we see rejuvenators used in both hot mix and cold mix pavements that have high recycled components in them, for example, millings or recycled shingles. And the rejuvenators are used in those mixes to offset the age stiffened binders of those recycled products. For today's webinar and today's presentation, we're really talking only about standalone topical applications of these treatments as purely pavement preservation tools. So starting out here with fog seals, a really simple definition of fog seals is they're emulsified asphalts, as I said, typically applied around 1/10 of a gallon per square yard. And they're also usually a low viscosity, slow to medium setting emulsion, so that they have the ability to flow rather easily, seal up small hairline cracks, fill in surface voids in the oxidized and raveled surface of the pavement. And I like to think of them kind of as a combination of sunscreen and raincoats. A sunscreen to protect the surface of the asphalt, particularly the asphalt binder, the black glue that holds the aggregate together, from being damaged by the UV rays of the sun, and a raincoat to help seal up small cracks and voids in the surface from moisture intrusion. So that's the basics of what fog seals are. And this is a picture of a fog seal job we did on the Plymouth Airport down in southeastern Massachusetts. This was a Massachusetts DOT project, and they utilize a gilsonite-based fog seal called GSB 78 that meets the FAA P608 specification for airport work. On the other end of this spectrum, or this category of fog seals and rejuvenators, we have either plant or petroleum-based penetrants or rejuvenators that we use. And this particular rejuvenator that you see in this picture is the Delta Mist that we'll learn about more later on. And these, they don't leave an asphalt residue. In fact, they have no asphalt in them. They strictly penetrate the pavement, and their goal is to reduce some of those aged binder stiffening effects and make the asphalt cement more flexible. So kind of, if we want to use an analogy, kind of like a skin moisturizer. So our skin gets dry as it sits out in the sun, and we'll put an aloe or some kind of moisturizing material on those to add life back, if you will, to our skin. And that's what we're doing here with these penetrating rejuvenators. And then to confuse matters just a little bit more, we have products which are, I guess we could call them a hybrid. They have an asphaltic fog seal component and also a rejuvenating component. That's what the Ergon eFog product is. The biggest eFog project we've done to date is this picture right here. This is Interstate 495 down in the Foxborough, Massachusetts area. And about, I guess it was 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, the Massachusetts DOT recognized they had a major problem with the open graded friction course pavement on that road. It was starting to ravel and lose aggregate. They were afraid it was going to fall apart before they could afford to replace that wearing surface. So they had us go down and apply the eFog fog seal, really as a band-aid approach to holding on to that pavement for another 2 or 3 years. And it was about a 10-mile length. We did the travel lanes and the shoulders that you see here in this picture. So what kind of pavements do we use fog seals and rejuvenators on? They are very much top of the curve preventive maintenance tools. These are not at all rehabilitative. I would say we've used them on roads with PCIs as low as maybe 70, but your best bang for the buck with these things is for roads with PCIs in 80 and above. You know, the more that I've gotten to know about these products and pavement management in general, I'm not sure there's such a thing as too early a time to apply these. In fact, I think if I was back to being a pavement manager as I was in the 90s when I was a public works director in New York, I might consider fog sealing every one of my new pavement installations, either later that same season or no later than the following year. And we'll show you an example of what might happen when you do that later on in our presentation here today. So here's a chart. Like all preservation treatments, the longer you wait to apply them, the less effective they'll be. If you apply them on a really good road, say a PCI above 90, we think you can get 4 years of life extension. If, on the other hand, you're using them as a Band-Aid on poor condition roads, maybe only 2 years of life extension. And here's a couple of pictures of good fog seal candidates from our asset management friends at the Environmental Partners Group. Both of these roads, PCI in the 80s range. The one on the right, lower 80s. The one on the left, upper 80s. both good fog candidates. As is this one from the pavement managers at Green International. This is high 80s. I don't see any cracking there, mostly just surface graying, oxidation. That would be a good fog seal or rejuvenator roadway candidate. So let's talk quickly about why we use these things. Any idea why the left side of this gentleman's face is so much more cracked and weathered than the right side of his face? Well, it's because he's a truck driver. So being in his truck all day long with the window open, the left side of his face gets a lot more exposed to UV sunlight damage than the right side. And do we think he's the kind of guy that puts a good quality sunscreen every morning before he jumps into his rig and reapplies throughout the day? Probably not. You know, most of us aren't that disciplined, and probably this gentleman wasn't either. And it's the same thing with the boards on the decks of our home. If we're disciplined about doing a good preventive maintenance program, putting a Thompson's water seal or one of those type products on the boards every few years, we can make them last a long time. But if we don't, they fall apart rather quickly. Well, asphalt cement is much like our skin, much like the wooden boards on at our homes. It gets more viscous over time, meaning as it ages, it dries out and becomes more brittle. So what our job is as pavement preservationists is to try to stop that process as soon as we can, because the longer we wait, the more cracking, the more raveling, and the more accelerated the pavement decay we see happening. And really, it happens mostly at the surface. You know, when we first pave a road, like you see in the upper left-hand corner here, everything's nice and black and flexible. If you cut out a chunk of that, you could bend it back and forth in your hand without much damage. But very quickly, it oxidizes, grays out. And a lot of that occurs from the top down. You've probably heard of top-down cracking. This graph on the right, it's a graph of depth on the left in millimeters. Versus the complex modulus, which is a measure of stiffness. And you'll see that up in the surface, the very top, say, couple inches of pavement, that's where we really lose a lot of our flexibility. So we apply these fog seals to protect from that aging, and rejuvenators help offset some of that aging. And here's what we hope to accomplish by using these products. We want to keep the water out. That's always a good thing. And this picture is great in that you can see a little hairline crack kind of through the middle of the picture here. And the fog seal has flowed down into that crack to seal it up. Other little small voids in the pavement surface have been sealed up. You can tell we protected from oxidation and stopped the raveling that had occurred. And if this had a rejuvenator in it, we also know we'd be restoring some of the flexibility. And by doing those things, what we hope to do is to slow down the rate of decay in a very cost-effective manner. And by slowing the rate of the decay, we're hoping to delay when we have to come back and do a major rehabilitation again. I'd like to focus, if I could, real quickly on this cost-effectively portion of this statement here. I don't know if you're familiar with this industry website called roadresource.org, but if you haven't had a chance to check it out, I'd really encourage you to do that. But there's 7 tabs along the top of this homepage here. One's labeled network optimization. And if you click on that, you can see in the upper right, this equivalent annualized cost concept. And we don't have time to cover it in any detail today, but essentially it's a way to compare treatments side by side on an annualized basis. So we take the cost of the treatment per square yard, how much life extension we expect to get from that treatment, we divide the cost by the life extension to come out with an equivalent annualized cost in terms of dollars per square yard per year. So I did that up in the upper left-hand corner here with this list of treatments, starting with a rejuvenating fog seal, a bonded wearing course, minor mill and fill, which is defined as 1.5 to 2 inch deep mill and fill, and full depth reclamation with 4 inches of hot mix on top of it. And that next column is the approximate square yard cost of those treatments in this region. Of course, every job's different, costs vary, but that's a pretty good average of what those things cost in this market. And then in the third column is what we believe are the average life extensions associated with each of those treatments. When you divide the cost per square yard by the life extension, you get the equivalent annualized cost. And The bar graph on the right shows how dramatically they increase the farther you go down the curve. So the rejuvenating fog seal comes in at less than 50 cents per square yard per year. Anytime you can use treatments that have an equivalent annual cost of less than 50 cents per square yard, you've got a very efficient pavement management program. So that's one of the huge economic benefits of using these. Keep good roads in good condition to avoid these huge equivalent annual costs later on. And when we talk about efficient pavement management, I'm not sure I can think of a better example of people who do that than the town of Lexington here in Massachusetts. In fact, they're so good at it that they were the winners of last year's national award, a very prestigious award for excellence in pavement preservation. And that's a picture of John Livesey, the town engineer on the left, receiving the award from the Foundation for Pavement Preservation President Scott Bergkamp on the right. And one of the reasons Lexington was chosen for that award is they religiously do this calculation called a remaining service life calculation that's spelled out and described in this FHWA publication here called the Quick Check of Your Highway Network Health. And again, we don't have time to delve into the concept a lot, but essentially it's a way of looking at how much new service life is injected into a roadway network in a given year, how much that network loses every year, and the difference being either a net gain or a loss in network service life. Really simple math. You can do it on the back of a napkin. You just make a list of all the treatments that your community uses. You identify the number of miles of that treatment that you did in a given program year, or that maybe you're going to do in this program year. You multiply the miles times the service life you attribute to that treatment, and you come up with a mile years number, which is a measure of new network service life being added to the network. And as I said, Lexington does this calculation religiously every year. And here's a summary chart of their calculations for the last 3 years, 2018 through 2020. And there's three things that I want to point out to you from this chart. The first is you look at the first column under treatments, you can see that Lexington typically is using about 7 different treatments each year from the top of the curve to the bottom of the curve. And that's one of the common denominators we see with really successful pavement management programs. They're using multiple treatments covering the whole curve and not just say 2 or 3 treatments, which is unfortunately all too common. The second thing I'd like to point out from this chart is if we look up the third row up from the bottom, you can see that the line labeled mile years of life lost annually. The network in Lexington is 131.5 centerline miles. So that's how many mile years it loses every year. There's just nothing that we can do about that. That's just simple service life loss for every network. The line below that is the net gain that they've achieved, because the tally of the numbers above shows that in each year they put new service life in that exceeded that 131.5 mile years lost. So we do this calculation a lot with communities, and very rarely do we see net gains 3 years in a row. So hats off to Lexington for pulling that off. And then the third thing that I want to point out relative to this webinar is the highlighted yellow areas, Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. You can see that they've done between 3 and 5 miles a year the last 3 years. And down in the last row of our chart, you can see that that has contributed between 6 and 11% of the new network life that they pumped into that network. So hats off again to the guys in Lexington, and that's a great example of how you can use these Fog Seals and Rejuvenators to be more successful pavement managers. So now it's my privilege to welcome the first of our mini asphalt experts today. This is Scott Metcalf, Vice President of the Ergon Asphalt and Emulsion company. Scott spent about 30 years in our industry, including 23 years working with Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. Fun fact about Scott is he's been involved with pavement preservation products in 49 of our 50 states, all but the state of Alaska. So if anybody's watching from Alaska, please invite Scotty to help out with your project so we can check that one off the list. Scotty, fire away.
Good deal. Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it very much. And great to be here with you guys today. So we're going to go to the next slide there and start off with what we're at. So we all see pavements like this, and this is at that top of the curve side. And if we look at this pavement, we see some hairline cracks starting to develop. We have loss of fines. This is a perfect candidate for microsurfacing. The fines are lost. This is a little too far on a fog seal. This would be the worst case we'd want to put a fog seal on. You have the little hairline cracks, and Dan showed a great picture earlier of those cracks getting filled with an emulsion, a low viscosity, filling those cracks up, because we do know that, let's talk about what oxidizes, what makes a pavement hard and brittle. It's air and it's water intrusion. And so those hairline cracks will allow water and moisture to get in there and oxidize the pavement. Kind of a unique thing on a pavement, if you took a core day one of a construction of a brand new pavement and you sliced it in a couple of quarters, and you check the modulus of that pavement, throughout the entire pavement section is going to be the continuous same modulus, exactly as Dan might have shown on an earlier graph there. As age oxidizes, that top layer, we always talk about the top layers where cracks begin to age harden and the modulus begins to stiffen. So why is that? It's oxidation. And the next slide will kind of talk about what we're losing in that pavement. What we're losing in that pavement is the maltines fraction. And it's an oilless resinous material that's broken up into three different materials. First is fitted sins, and second, and then saturated hydrocarbons. We're not going to get in this big, long discussion of chemistries, but if I take these chemicals and I combine them together, they all create asphalt. Now, each and every asphalt has a little bit different amount of second acidifins and first acidifins. It depends on where that crude oil came from. But I think the real critical concept here is when you heat this and age oxidize it, the saturates, the second afinifins and the first afinifins migrate out. They age oxidize, they come out. So that is what's leaving your pavement and starting to get brittle. The other thing that's important is they're all immiscible. So if I take these and I put them back into each other, they will absorb each other to the extent of total saturation. So that gives us the flexibility. This is why we know that rejuvenators do work and you can restore the life of a pavement. Never overheat over 350 degrees, because these are the first things that come out. If you get some mix and maybe it's a cool weather and the producer decides, hey, it's, it's a little cold in October here, we got to get this thing paved, crank the heat up. These are the things that are leaving your asphalt, making it more brittle. Next slide. I think we kind of talked about this. This is just what those resins or each one of those compounds we just talked about add to the value there of asphalt. Next slide. But really, when we look at this pavement, how did this pavement get to where it's at? It's not, traffic's less than 1,000 cars a day on this road. It's been sitting out in the sun for 20 years, and it's age oxidized block cracking. Now, it's not structurally deficient. It's very sound. What's going on is it doesn't have sunscreen. It needed the sunscreen. As Dan alluded to, sunscreen and raincoats. The sunburn will fade. The damage lasts forever. And so if we had put a fog seal on this early and often, these block cracks would not have appeared. And I think I can testify, I grew up in Santa Barbara, and for 20 some years, the county of Santa Barbara every 3 years fog sealed religiously. They stopped that program after someone complained that it was just a paint job, and they didn't realize that putting sunscreen on was great. Within 10 to 12 years after that, the road had cancer, was raveling, cracking, block cracking, looked much like this street. So it really does, a repetitive application of the sunscreen is a great process, keeping good roads good, top of the curve. And then, has it been researched? You alluded to Ed Maris and the 495 project you did. These were some of the research programs we submitted to Ed. from Georgia Tech. They had some open grade that was rattling, same issue that Ed had, and they found it to be beneficial. It's been evaluated in Florida. I actually have some reports here. I found that from 1963 and a 1958 report talking about the benefits of Rejuvenator. So it's a great process. It's been well documented and just one of those tools that probably hasn't been utilized enough. And I'm glad to hear that you guys are utilizing them and their great benefits applied early and often. Next slide. Here's a specification. Most of your specs, as most of you guys know, are about 10 lines about some properties. This is a pretty lengthy specification. It goes through the criteria of the polymers, and it goes through the criteria of the rejuvenators and the end product and performance you expect. So it's a little complicated, but there's a specification for you. It's been well documented and well utilized throughout the nation. Next slide. And here's the typical good candidates. They're aged oxidized. They can be dense graded HMA. They can be open graded HMA. They can be chip seals. But we really don't want to apply a rejuvenating fog seal. Now, I want to emphasize rejuvenating fog seal over a slurry seal or microsurfacing, simply because that rejuvenator, those microsurfacings are so rich in asphalt, that rejuvenator will penetrate in there and soften that existing asphalt up. So, but great candidates for new asphalt. Get it on early and often. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. That was excellent. Appreciate you sharing the more detailed information with us. Our next guest speaker is also an industry expert, asphalt industry expert. Wade's been playing around with black goop, as I like to call it, for I think 23 years, he told me. And interestingly enough, with Wade, he got his start actually making asphalt emulsions as a plant operator. So Wade is based out of Arizona, and he's here to talk about the Rejuvenator that we've been using the last 5 or 6 years called Delta Mist. Wade?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Correct. Back in the early 90s, ERA 25 was a emulsified rejuvenating agent. I was a mill operator in Escondido, California. But fast forward, yeah, I'm talking to you from Tucson, Arizona today. So it's 111 degrees today. So when you talk about oxidizing pavements, I feel like I'm in ground zero. But we're excited to talk to you. I am the principal of Pavement Preservation Products. My partner company, Collaborative Aggregates, manufactures and distributes a product called Delta Mist. And it's my pleasure to talk to everyone about Delta Mist today. Next slide, please. So as Dan alluded to earlier on, biorejuvenation is a technology that's becoming more and more accepted by agencies. So my goal today is to talk to you a little bit more about biorejuvenation, the technology behind it, a little bit about the agricultural products used in biorejuvenators, at least the more popular ones, and its primary uses. And today, topical uses or spray applied surface treatments will be what we'll delve into a little bit more. Next slide, please. So when you're talking about definitions of biorejuvenators, to me, a great definition would be a product that comes from agricultural or forestry means that's specifically formulated and designed to coalesce, coat, and penetrate asphalt and asphalt pavements. And I would go one step further and say that it's a good biorejuvenator is specifically formulated for the primarily uses in pavement, which is paving or mixing grade and spray grade. Today, we're going to talk about our spray grade biorejuvenator called Delta Mist. Next slide. So what are some of the components about Delta Mist that makes it appealing? I've looked at a lot of different biorejuvenators over the years, and I landed on the Delta Mist because of a few reasons. It's obviously a plant-based emulsified oil. And I say the word emulsified oil because not all spray rejuvenators are emulsified. And I'll get into why the emulsification process, to me, is a real critical benefit to this biorejuvenator. What we obviously wanted to do, as Dan mentioned, we want to be that lotion that gets in and penetrates that pavement. And we want to restore or replicate the loss of those fractions. You know, Scott did a good job talking about the 5 fractions that make up asphalt. When you lose those fractions, how do we get in there and replenish them? And when we do that, we obviously want to restore the elastomeric and ductile properties that is lost due to oxidation. And when you do that, you add service life to the road, you reduce your overall life cycle costs. And on my soapbox, you know, when you're putting together your pavement preservation program, dollar for dollar, you will not find a more better use of your dollars for life cycle extension of roadways. Next slide. So when P3 was looking for partners, we wanted to make sure that our core values and core principles were in line with our partners. And Collaborative Aggregates has similar core principles when making products. They obviously want to do no harm when fixing roads, and their product Delta Mist is environmentally benign. It's effective and efficient. It's got to be cost comparative. You can have a great product, but if it doesn't make sense and there's not an ROI behind it, what do you got? And I think the most important thing is it's got to be easy to use. You want the easy button here. You know, our product is emulsified. We want it to replicate existing equipment that people are already using when performing rejuvenating fog seals and fog seals. And we'll get into that as well. And heating and storage and handling is at room temperature, which is also a benefit. Next slide, please. So we're going to see different variations today of the Kendall curve. And I'm not going to steal Dan's discussion on this because his is exceptional later on in the presentation. But I want you to think about, congratulations, you've embraced the concept of pavement preservation as an agency. You're no longer chasing good money on bad roads, and you've adopted preservation over worst first roads. So now you have a pavement management system and you're looking to incorporate tools. We're proud to be a trusted tool in Lexington, Mass's pavement preservation program and a trusted product by Indus. But say you're on the fence and you're looking about new tools in your toolbox. Where do you plug it in? You know, I'm with these gentlemen. Why wait to rejuvenate? Guys, we have a phenomenon happen where refineries are getting exceptionally good at coking and cracking the light ends out of asphalt, and it's just not lasting as long as it used to. So the earlier the better as far as the service life extension. In our slide here, by applying Delta Mist in the first year, we can extend that service life out, keep it in good condition, excellent condition, I should say, through the first 4 years. And the second application can keep your pavement in excellent condition all the way through 8 and 9 years. So that's kind of the foundation of rejuvenating fog seals and biorejuvenators. Next slide, please. So we've had a few analogies spoke of earlier, and I like to use the analogy of bacon. And I apologize if I'm ruining your Saturday morning experience of making breakfast when you start thinking about your work. But let's think of our roads as bacon. New pavements are applied. They're very flexible. They're full of their essential fractionalized oils, similar to what bacon is out of the package. You can tie it in a knot. It's full of its essential fractions or oils. We expose that to a high heat temperature and we extract those oils from that. That's really the analogy that's happening in our roadways. We're losing the essential oils that keep that material flexible. Now, when you have that crispy piece of bacon or you have that oxidized piece of pavement, what can we do to reverse that? Well, we can absolutely add the oil back onto the material and it becomes flexible again. Does it have to be the bacon grease oil? No, it can be a plant-based oil and you're going to get very, very similar performance characteristics with very similar molecules. Next slide, please. So I'm a visual learner, and I think some of you guys are out here too. So I'm going to walk you through what an application of the Delta Mist looks like. How do you apply it? And if you could start the slide, please, I'd let you. So what we're looking at right here is an Etnire Maximizer 2. We've put the Delta Mist in there. We're applying it, I believe, at 0.08 of a gallon per square yard. We got great bar height, great bar pressure. We got good working equipment. Looks relatively new. Good triple overlap on the tips. Probably a 5 to 10 degree positioning of those number 2 tips. That's a great example of applying Delta Mist. What you're not seeing is dust. You're not seeing a lot of equipment. You're not seeing a lot of unnecessary movements down the roadway. It's simple to apply, very easy to apply. And don't adjust your screen. That is a white material. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's a white material in the next slide. So this is where I get on my soapbox and talk about making decisions on applications the morning of the job is too late. I'm a big advocate of doing a little just-in-time training. Huddle as a supplier, agencies, reach out to your suppliers and your contractors, and let's get a meeting prior to the application and talk about what the shot rate's going to be. Each road might be different. Each road might be different types of pavement. So how are we going to adjust that? Who's the inspector? Who's got the call? There's some science behind application rates, and I'm not going to get too much into it because I think Matt does an exceptional job. But there's ring test kits that we can do, and we can do small known application rates and understand the absorbency of the pavement, the cure time. It's a nice plausible moment to discuss what we're going to expect on these roadways. So I call this slide measure twice, cut once. Preparation, I won't get into too much because Matt does shortly down here, but as you can see right now, we protected the storm drains. We didn't have to cover the manhole covers. The left lane was applied, the right lane you can see. That white color is our surface active chemical, or our emulsifier. So as a contractor, an agency, you're going to get some visual cues as to when the, we call that cure and break occurs right here, or the material is dispersing and the surface active chemical or emulsifier is leaving the system and leaving the oil on the roadway and penetrating into the pavement. Next slide, please. Number one question I've seen already come up here right now is, do we have to grind or remove striping? My answer is it can be applied directly over existing paint. Crosswalks that have really thick thermoplastic striping, obviously the material does not penetrate that. So you might want to have some sand on hand to do some light sanding over a crosswalk area. But for the most part, there's no sanding required. And you can come right up on the curb line without any fear of overspray on the curbs as well. So how do we know the material works? Obviously, we have some visual projects that have stood the test of time, as well as NCAT test tracks, as well as some lab results right here. What we're looking about when we're talking about Glover Row, this slide really shows that from two sets of cores taken, the Glover Row parameters used to identify surface asphalt, and they're early susceptible to cracking. With the reduction of 55%, we can really correlate this material is going to extend your service life out as expected, anywhere from 3 to 5 years. Visual inspection goes down white, kicks over like a clear liquid would, and then anywhere, depending on temperatures, 60 minutes to 90 minutes should be ready for to open it up to traffic. Proud to be part of the town of Lexington's Pavement Preservation program and a trusted tool for their award-winning program. As you can see in residential neighborhoods, we take great care in using wands, hand wands. A driver's favorite tool is the hand wand on their spreader truck. But we want to take great care in applying the right amount of material down. I like to say that the right amount of material is perfect. This is not a case of more is better. And so understanding the application rates and applying that is imperative. Town of Putnam, Connecticut, again, great project with that town. Next slide. So what to expect? There's an example of a lane applied. You come back 6 months later, you can still see the material very visible on the surface. Engineers' estimates, it really depends a lot of factors, but the material cost is relatively inexpensive. So to learn more about collaborative aggregates, I'd encourage you to take a moment today and go to our website at collaborativeraggregates.com. On our press section, we proudly boast a lot of projects, case studies, success stories, videos, and upcoming projects. Click on our mailer and we'll put you in touch on projects in your area. Thanks, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you, Wade. Thank you both, you and Scott both, for joining us. Our next industry expert, third asphalt expert in a row, is our QC manager here at Indus. Matt went to Worcester Polytech, so we know he's wicked smart. And he's going to tell us about some of the keys to successful fog seal and rejuvenator applications. Matthew?
Thank you, Dan. Thank you. I'd like to start off just with a quick highlight on a very useful checklist published by FHWA for Fog Seal. It was originally introduced in 2002, and the series I found was updated and revised in 2019. And they also expanded their offerings to include a lot more pavement preservation techniques in this checklist series. So they're a very helpful resource for both contractors and agency inspectors, helping you get through a job and produce a nice product. So I encourage everybody to check them out. As with all preservation treatments, candidate selection has a huge impact on success. Fog seals are applied with those to those pavements at the top of the deterioration curve, as you've heard from the other presenters. Those are the roads that you look at and think, well, I could go another few years before we do anything. But fog sealing will help slow that oxidation process that's already started. And using the rejuvenating fog seals like E-Fog and Delta Mist will help reverse that surface aging and restore some softness to the top quarter to half inch that's beginning to get hard and brittle even a year or two in. So once you've selected a candidate, the ASTM sand patch test and the ring test that Wade had showed can help with determining how much you should spray as it measures your macro texture on your pavement surface. So when it comes to fog seal application, everything centers around the distributor and the crew operating it. Nozzles on the bar need to be clean, properly sized, and correctly adjusted to achieve a uniform finish. Spray bar height should be set to achieve that triple overlap that Wade had also mentioned. And that's where every point on the roadway, except for the areas under the outermost nozzles, sees spray from 3 nozzles on the bar. The nozzle angle ensures the sprays don't overlap and that they do overlap and don't collide with each other. Once that distributor is set up, we need to calibrate all of the onboard measuring systems to make sure we're getting the desired output. Once we're confident we can measure everything, we spray a short test strip over some roofing felt or some geotextile pads and we weigh them. We do a similar calibration with the sand spreader using a tarp to catch the sand and transfer it to a weighing pan. And then we do a little bit of mathematic gymnastics to make sure we're getting the correct output per square yard out of the distributor truck. So material handling is pretty straightforward, especially with the bio-based rejuvenator like Delta Mist. But there's just a few pitfalls to watch out for before, when you're using the fog seal emulsions. The biggest is avoiding cross-contamination. Putting a cationic fog seal into a distributor that shot anionic tack the night before is just asking for trouble. Also excessive heat, over circulation, high pump pressures, and those can also affect the stability of the emulsion through over shearing it. So now that we have a road to treat and a truck to spray it with, we need to do a little preparation of the surface. Now's a great time to do some crack sealing if you have any. And then a thorough sweeping to get that entire roadway nice and clean, especially down in your gutter line where you might have some dirt that's crept in. One more sweep on the morning of the application is never a bad idea before you cover those utilities and drainage structures. As far as pavement markings go, roadresource.org recommends removing the thermoplastic pavement markings. Your water-based pavement markings are, you can mask them if you have large arrows and such that you want to preserve, but they can just be sprayed over and then repainted afterwards. The clear bio-based rejuvenators like Delta Mist that Wade had mentioned do not obliterate the markings, and so they don't require uncovering of the markings or the structures. And it's always a good idea to notify your neighbors about the upcoming work. The town of Lexington does an excellent job keeping their residents informed of what's going on, who's doing it, where, when, and why. And they use a variety of methods to reach as many people as possible. And this goes a long way to helping set your job up for success when everybody around knows what's going on. Your fog seal should only be applied when the temperature is 60 and rising. There's no rain in the forecast, and avoid breezy days as the wind can affect your spray pattern. It's also a good idea to use the first couple hundred feet in the morning as a test section. And that's to evaluate your spray rate. Is your pavement absorbing more or less than expected? Does it look too heavy? Do you have some fat spots? And when in doubt, like Wade mentioned, go with the lower application rate. And with application rate confirmed, it's time to start your spraying. Areas that you can't reach with the truck should be hand sprayed, and it's always a good idea to have a plan to avoid painting yourself into a corner, so to speak. You'll want to keep your traffic off of the fog seal until it's fully cured. And if you can close the entire road, that's even better. Letting traffic on your uncured fog seal can result in unsightly tire marks and tracking of the emulsion into unwanted areas such as roadways and other driveways. And I saw a question out there about curing time. Curing time is primarily affected by heat and humidity, faster with more heat and lower humidity. It can vary anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. Shaded areas will take longer than your sunny areas, but most roads are ready in about an hour. Once the road has cured, the structure coverings can be removed and any excess blood or sand can be swept. So just like to thank everybody for the opportunity, and that's my quick high-level overview of fog seal applications, and just wanted to remind everybody that it's the little things like you see here with the hand spraying guy that make a big difference in the outcome of your project. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for all that you do working with our crews to give our customers the highest quality workmanship possible. We appreciate that. Next up, it's my privilege to introduce one of those all-star pavement managers from the town of Lexington. They're one of their civil engineers, Michael Sprague. Mike's had his hands involved there in their pavement management program for the last few years, that award-winning pavement management program. And he's going to be interviewed today by my colleague, Art Baker, and they're going to talk about Lexington's experience using these products. Mike and Art.
Thanks, Dan. And thanks everybody for taking a little time out of your day and attending. Mike, it looks like they saved the best for last. So without further ado, I'm sure there's a bunch of people who are anxious to hear from someone who's actually tried both of these products. So Mike, why don't you first start by just telling us how and why you decided to add fog seals to your pavement management toolbox?
Sure. Yeah, we decided we needed some kind of treatment for that upper curve. Roads that were recently paved that we were seeing some oxidation on, especially the roads that we were seeing it on early. So we needed something that fit that kind of role, and Fog Seal really fit the bill for us. It did more than just crack seal. It gave us a couple more years of life out of the road before we needed something like a micro surface or a chip seal.
Great. Dan mentioned you've been doing fog seals for, I thought, 4 or 5 years. When did you first start applying fog seals in Lexington?
We first put fog seal on the road in 2016 using the EFOG.
And what condition of roadways have you put these on? Like what PCI ratings? I know you guys have a very good pavement management plan. What PCI ratings do you apply these to?
We try to apply them in roads that are 90 or above. Our program right now automatically schedules a fog seal 5 years after a road has been paved.
And how about types of road, Mike? A lot of people have trouble deciding, what's a good type of road for a fog seal? Is it residential streets? Is it collector streets with lots of traffic? What do you do in Lexington?
Yeah, we've done the whole gamut. We've done dead ends and cul-de-sacs all the way up to the main roads leading in and out of town that see thousands of cars a day. So we've applied it to all road conditions.
Great. And I know you guys have, I'd like you to talk briefly about your notices that you put out to residents, because I think it's a key to any successful pavement management program is, what kind of notices do you put out to your residents so they're aware of what you're doing and why you're doing it?
Yeah, sure. So in April, we start with a map of the entire town that's being paved and getting preservation treatments with a very brief description of each of these treatments. And that's emailed to all, that's mailed to all abutters on these streets. Then a couple weeks before we actually do a treatment, we'll put electronic message boards out, giving drivers a heads up. And then we're also a couple days before the actual treatment, we'll hand deliver notices with a little bit more detail on what to expect for abutters and with the work that's coming up. We also, last year, we started doing reverse 911 calls, also trying to get the word out as much as possible.
Great. And so 2 more questions. One, you've been doing it now for 5 years, so you must have seen the results. What kind of results are you seeing by applying these fog seals early in the life cycle of your asphalt?
Yeah, so those earliest roads, they were starting to oxidize prematurely. So putting this fog seal on really gave us more time with those roads. They're just now getting to the point where we're thinking of putting on another treatment, maybe a microsurface or something like that, instead of having to go with the mill and fill. So we're starting to see, in our experience, some great benefits of these types of treatments and the life extension that we were hoping to get out of them.
Great. And then last question, let's, you having done both products, I think we've established that both products really do the same thing overall, but each of them have their benefits. Can you talk a little bit about, how do you decide which material, the e-fog or the Delta Mist you're going to put on your road?
Yes, so with the e-fog material, that was what we started with. Comparatively, it's a little bit cheaper, but at the end of the season, we did have to reapply line striping, which, we've got bike lanes, center lines, fog lines. We've got a lot of striping. So that added a little bit of cost to the overall project. But it provided a newer looking road. Residents were happy to see that the road looked new again. Unfortunately, we have a number of concrete driveways and paver driveways and non-asphalt driveways, and we were getting some tracking onto those, which we did receive some complaints about. As much as you try to educate people about keeping off of it for a little while, you just can't avoid that. But we tried e-fog, Delta Mist, a couple of years ago. It's the product that dries clear, which has provided a great benefit for the line striping. It's not needed anymore, which saved some costs and offsets the slightly increased cost that we have with that product. We also don't have to worry about the tracking of the product into driveways or anything like that, or spraying onto granite curbing. So for us, that benefit there was why we decided to switch to using that for now. One thing I will say in our experience with that is in crosswalks and areas where there's a lot of foot traffic with paint, we want to cover those up because we've had some slips and falls from people. Even though the asphalt is dry and safe, it's the crosswalks and the paint that are a little bit slippery. So we've learned to just cover those up or use a little sand on those.
Yeah, and I think that's important to point out. They have a very short period of time where they're a little bit slick, and then after that, that condition does go away. And then I think another thing important to point out is each community is different. For example, the rural areas, my experience example out in my territory in the western part of the state of Massachusetts, where it's a little bit more rural, where they don't have as many pavement markings and manhole covers and things like that and structures. E-fog is a good product for them in the rural areas. So I appreciate your time, Mike. Anything to add before we close?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Indus for inviting me out here and letting me be a part of this. And I thank both suppliers, e-fog and Delta Mist. Both products have been working great for us. And we've seen great performance from both of them. Perfect.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you guys. Yeah, thank you, Art and Mike. And Mike, you guys should be really proud of the job you're doing there in Lexington. I think your residents, your taxpayers are very blessed to have you and your engineering team doing their pavement management. Super job, setting the gold standard for pavement management in this region. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Before we wrap things up and answer your questions here at the end, let me just summarize quickly what I think are the primary benefits of these treatments. We've said that we're looking to cost effectively, that's always important, slow the rate of decay so that we can avoid having to rehabilitate pavements, right? We want to extend pavement life as cost effectively as we can. And we say we're doing that by protecting against moisture, oxidation, raveling, and then when we're using rejuvenators and adding some flexibility back in. But how do we know we're doing that? How do we know we're achieving those things? Excuse me. Well, I've had the opportunity now to be involved with two projects where it was made obvious to me exactly what we're achieving with these products. And let me tell you their quick stories real quick. The first was this project here up in upstate New York, Oneonta. It's Interstate 88. Excuse me. This is a concrete pavement. The travel lanes are a concrete pavement, as you can see in this photo here, but the shoulders were asphalt pavements. They were paved in 2002 and quickly started to ravel. So New York State DOT had us come up and apply a fog seal in 2006. That was a GSB 88 gilsonite-based fog seal. And within a year or two, we were talking to the folks at DOT and they said, geez, we think we wasted our money. You know, we went back and looked at those shoulders and they're all grayed out. They look just like they did before we applied the fog seal. So we did a little research and we determined some ways to evaluate whether the fog seal was effective and still working or not. So we retained VHB. They sent one of their pavement engineers up there, Danny Kosalski, if any of you have worked with Danny over the years. And he did this macro texture test that Matt Tito talked about earlier, sand patch test. And what it is a way of measuring how much raveling has occurred, how much macro texture there is in a pavement surface. And luckily on that job, we had taped off with roofing felt paper some untreated control areas. So we did a bunch of these sand patch tests on both treated and untreated sections of those shoulders. And what the VHB report concluded is that we had about 21 to 28% less macro texture depth, again, a measure of raveling on the treated areas versus the untreated. So we were happy to determine for New York State DOT that in spite of the fact that we lost that dark black color, the product definitely was working and was extending the life of the pavement. And then more recently, we've had an ongoing experiment or case study right here in Braintree on Granite Street. It's right around the corner from our headquarters where we're broadcasting from today. And it's a segment from Lundquist Drive, where our building is located, northward down to the Granite Plaza. So back in 2015, the town of Braintree milled and repaved this road, curb to curb, 1.5 inches, 2 inches deep. And that was about the time that we started working with Fog Seals and Rejuvenators. And we got the idea, geez, I wonder if the town would let us do a little experiment and just treat one side of this roadway. So with Bob Campbell, he was the town engineer at the time, with his permission, we did just that. We went out and we fog sealed using the eFog product, the southbound lane. So that in this picture is the right-hand lane. We're looking southbound here. And then 3 years later, when we started to see that starting to lighten up in color a little bit, we fog sealed it again in 2019. So here's some information on those applications. It was early October of 2016 that we applied the first eFog application at exactly 1/10 of a gallon per square yard. 3 years later, in August, a slightly lighter rate of application at 0.08 of a gallon per square yard. And this was a photo taken right after that second application, while the material was curing and before it was reopened to traffic. And what have we learned from this little experiment? Well, the first thing we realized is, wow, the treated areas absorbs far less moisture than the untreated areas. I took this picture in January of 2020. I just went out for a walk for some lunch, I think it was. And I was walking down the street and I looked and I was shocked at how much lighter in color the treated area was than the adjacent untreated areas. So that was proof positive to me that fog seals were effective in protecting the pavement matrix from absorbing water. And we know as pavements absorb water, they oxidize and degrade much faster. And then about a week ago, Conrad Ledger, who is the Director of Asset Management for Environmental Partners Group, and that's the pavement management consultant that Braintree is now using, he came out to evaluate this little project that we did, and he took this photo here. And you can see the untreated side in the bottom half of this picture, clearly way more raveled and cracked than the treated side over on the opposite side of the road. And then even more surprising are these photos right here. So the picture on the left is the treated side and the picture on the right is the untreated. So we clearly have had a lot more raveling and loss of fines in the untreated than the treated. And Conrad's estimate is the untreated side is about 6 PCI or pavement condition index points lower than the treated side. So kind of early in our case study here, we're 5 years in, but I don't think it's too early to conclude that these products are definitely effective in slowing the rate of pavement decay. And why is that important? You know, I got thinking, would it be possible? We've all seen graphs like this where we compare some pavement preservation treatments, the blue lines up top there, where we come in early and periodically do some pavement preservation treatments to extend the life of the road before they need major rehabilitation again. Would it be possible to preserve a road doing these treatments, say, on a 3-year cycle, just continuously reapplying? Not sure that you could. We were only 2 cycles in thus far, but I went to roadresource.org again, that network optimization tab that we looked at earlier, and there's a life cycle cost calculator, an interactive calculator on the website. You see here. So I used that tool to do this little example I wanted to share with you today. It took a mile of road, 30 feet wide. That works out to 17,600 square yards. That's the number you see in the upper right-hand corner there. And then for net present value calculation purposes, I used an inflation rate of 3% and an interest rate of 2.5%. And I did 2 side-by-side examples. Essentially, in year 0, which was 2015 for our little case study out here, we did the mill and fill across both sides of the road. I assumed that we would do nothing on the northbound lane. So we would wait 12 years, then come back and mill and fill it again. That's the typical life of a shallow mill and fill in this region, about 12 years. But on the right-hand side, you can see I came back 1 year later, did a rejuvenating fog seal, and then I kept that up every 3 years. So I did another one in year 4, year 7, right out through year 25. And again, is this possible? Could you maintain a section of highway just doing nothing but fog seals like this? Scott Metcalf mentioned earlier, a community he lived in as a child did that. It was effective for them. I don't know if we could do that in this climate here or not, but if we could, what might be the results? So using this life cycle calculator, this would be the economic results. You can see the cost of milling and filling every 12 years over a 25-year period. So would cost a little less than $800,000, as you see in red on the left, whereas the fog seal maintenance program might cost less than $500,000, as you see on the right. So about a $300,000 savings. So that gets me excited. Again, is it possible? We don't know. We'll find out over time. But if it is, surely some big possible financial savings. So again, there's a picture of our case study. Southbound lane on the right treated, untreated northbound lane on the left. We'll continue to monitor it over time and keep everybody up to date with it. But I think we can all safely conclude that these products can help us slow the rate of decay, extend pavement life, and avoid costly rehabilitation. So we appreciate you joining us here today. I think we might have gone a minute or 2 over, and I apologize for that. We'll